What's going on, everybody? We are back. We got a new year. We got 2022 of the Club and Sub podcast. We got episode number 76. As usual, brought to you guys on betonline.ag for a 50% bonus up to your first $1,000 deposit. Use the promo code Club Sub. Tonight, we are talking about UFC Vegas 46, the card that is falling apart by the seams. It is the apocalypse here. We got Giga Chikadze versus Calvin Kattar. We were actually just talking, what if that fight falls out? We're going to be talking about Chase Sherman versus Jake Collier headlining a fight night. We're close. It could happen. It is a live outcome here with Omicron going crazy. But yeah, tonight you got me, John at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny_Lags, and Luke at SWR_betting. And yeah, we're going to take you through the remnants of this once promising card. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. We have literally 11 canceled fights from this card. more canceled fights than we have fights. So yeah, we're gonna try to make it fun. We're gonna talk up what we got. Jump right in here. We got Brian Kelleher, Kevin Croom. Lags, you have an opinion here?
I was making a joke earlier that this is the UFC journeyman versus the regional journeyman, pretty much. And I mean, honestly, I think if there was a playable under 2.5 that they release, I'd probably jump on that. But I think this is Kelleher all day, really.
Luke, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have a chance to go back and do anything crazy on Croom, so, take my opinion with a grain of salt. Kelleher's probably going to be, I would say mid 200s, maybe minus 300, whether you agree, disagree. I just think that's probably what the line's going to be. They haven't opened anything yet for it, right?
No,
Have they?
No.
So I kind of think that's what it's going to be. If you're going to do anything, I would say maybe take a pop on Kelleher, ITD, which might be, closer to evens around there, maybe like minus 150 or something. So that's what I would do. I'm just not a fan of Kevin Croom, but at the same time, Kelleher definitely is just not the archetype of guy, regardless of who he's fighting, that you really want to back, at like up minus 300 price tag. He's not a great minute winner historically, but he's dangerous though. And, if you don't come proper against a guy like Brian Kelleher, he will expose you. And, he's, despite, his shitty UFC record, dude's fought a lot of tough guys in there. I do think he needs to be given credit for that. But yeah, to my point, you can't be laying like heavy chalk on on Kelleher. So if I was to do anything, I'd probably be looking to like Kelleher ITD.
Yeah, I guess I more or less agree. I mean, I also obviously haven't taped the fight either. But I guess look, Kevin Croom is terrible. I bet Alex Caceres against him in his last fight, Luke. I think you did as well, right?
I don't remember what I did in that, to be honest. I don't remember.
But either way, he's quite bad. I mean, he's a proactive grappler, but he's not very good at grappling, in my opinion, at least as compared to UFC grapplers. But what I will say is he is a big 145er, and Kelleher was just cutting weight to fight at 135, and now he's fighting at 145. I don't really love that for Kelleher. I don't really have any interest in taking a stab at Croom, even if he is like plus 250, just because I don't really think he belongs here. Like Luke, you mentioned it. I mean, look at the guys that are beating Kelleher. It's just, I mean, he basically loses to very good fighters and beats not very good fighters. That's kind of the story of his career. So, yeah, I mean, if we get like a plus 200 Kelleher ITD, then yeah, that might be interesting. But otherwise, I'll probably pass it. I mean, this is a mess. It's just kind of a microcosm of the entire card. So we'll move on. We got TJ Brown. He was originally supposed to be fighting Gabriel Benitez, which was a really interesting fight. Now he's fighting Charles Rosa, taking this on very short notice. Luke, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it's like an okay spot for Brown if he's smart, but the problem is he's just often not a very intelligent fighter. We've seen him hurt in pretty much damn near every single one of his fights in some different capacity, or threatened or put in danger. I think he has a path to wrestle on the ground, but I also think like a really sneaky, guard sub, like armbar type scenario is very live from Charles Rosa. And yeah, we're seeing TJ Brown kind of around that like minus 250 or something, right? It's like, I mean, you can't lay that on TJ Brown. Am I clamoring to play Rosa, especially on, 48 hours, notice or whatever the case is going to be? Probably not. But I am interested, honestly, in just taking a flyer on Rosa by sub, just because I think there's, based on the style dynamic, I think there's going to be opportunities for it. We will see Brown consistently wrestle, and I've just seen him stick his head into guillotines. We saw him get a guillotine from side control. We were talking about that before we jumped on the pod against Jordan Griffin. That was probably the toughest L I've ever taken in my entire life. Yeah, I don't think he's a bad fighter per se. I just don't think there's a ton of overall process to his game. So to lay that kind of a number on him, I'm not really interested. Should he win this fight more often than not? Yes. But yeah, it's definitely an easy pass from a money line for me.
Yeah, I mean, I more or less agree. It's kind of weird because, like, had this been a full camp for Rosa at this number, I'd 100% bet him. Like, obviously, you have the concerns that Rosa has pretty bad hips, bad takedown defense, accepts bottom, plays guard, all things you don't want against a wrestler with reasonable jiu-jitsu like TJ Brown. But I mean, the truth is Brown's strength schedule has been quite poor. Like, as you mentioned, Luke, he gets hurt just about every fight. Like, I think Rosa is pretty much a superior striker. I think when it comes to submission grappling, he's the better submission grappler. It's just, how live is Brown to get guard subbed? I don't know. But in general, on a full camp, like, look, he lost the fight clearly, but Rosa held his own with Damon Jackson, who I would say is a superior wrestler to TJ Brown. And on top of that, you have TJ Brown's penchant for just deciding not to wrestle. He waited until he was on one leg against Danny Chavez to wrestle that fight. He should have lost there's a pretty good argument that he lost his last fight against Kai Kamaka, and he really didn't proactively wrestle there either, which was a very clear path to victory after seeing the Jonathan Pierce fight with Kai Kamaka. And so, I sit here and I'm like, I don't, like, if he doesn't wrestle with Rosa, I think Rosa's going to fuck him up, to be completely honest with you. I don't know if he'll finish him, but look, I mean, Rosa was winning a standing fight with Shane Burgos. He beat Kevin Aguilar in a kickboxing match. Rosa's not, he's a janky striker, but he's not a terrible striker. So I actually think it's a okay spot for him, but 48 hours notice, I mean, fuck that. Like, I'm with you, Luke. Like, if we get like a plus 700, plus 800 subline, yeah, I mean, I'll take a poke at it, but I'm not passionate about it. Legs, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you nailed it right on the head, John, really, with the how do you play really Rosa against any kind of decent grappler? And that's kind of what we have here. Obviously, I mean, if Brown comes with any kind of decent game plan, which I think he should with James Krause in his corner, I think this should be a solid spot for Brown. It's just like the line's getting way too wide, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Luke, I'll stick with you here. We got Ramiz Brahimaj taking on Court McGee. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it was not a fight I anticipated to have like any action on, but actually McGee's probably one of my strongest takes on the card for like a ton of different reasons, to be honest. Brahima, your traditional early round one kind of kitchen sink jiu-jitsu guy. But in the scenarios that we have not seen him be able to get guys out of there, he's gassed in every single scenario, outside of his most recent fight against Griffin. But the commonality, or I should say the non-commonality there, between the past fights he's gassed, he didn't wrestle in that fight at all. And I think it was a product of the fact that when he has gotten extended, he's like, or when he hasn't been able to get those, he's like, okay, I'm going to gas or whatever. So he tried to play it more conservative, and what happened, he just got pot shotted, and I think almost 2x on strikes at distance against Max Griffin. He just didn't have much of an answer. So like how it relates to McGee, like McGee stuffs takedowns at 69%, has never been controlled for more than 3+ minutes in any UFC fight spanning over a decade. And he's fought some really strong wrestlers and grapplers in there to boot. Even the last 7 guys that McGee has fought have been nothing worse than a brown belt BJJ status. Even a guy in Sean Brady, who we obviously know is a pretty strong wrestler, Daniel Gracie black belt, pretty strong top game. He was able to get to kind of back ride on Court at points, but Court was able to shuck off the hooks. I think Brady got less than like a minute and a half or so of control in that fight. Obviously lost the fight, but still, nonetheless, forced a close fight and actually did outstrike Sean Brady in the 3rd round of that fight and forced a split. I don't think it should have been a split. Personally, I think Brady won the first 2 rounds, but nonetheless, he still went out there and actually won a round off a top 15 guy now in Sean Brady, which is important to note. So I just don't think there's much overall merit to like Ramiz just like Russell fucks Court. One, because it hasn't been, or I should say it hasn't ever happened to Court extended. 2, Ramiz has never done that extended to anybody. Court's never been submitted. Could he knock him out? I guess. But once again, Ramiz hasn't knocked anybody out. And I've seen, McGee be competitive and take, some decent shots. Yes, he's been dropped a handful of times. Sure, Pons knocked him out, but Pons is one of the best, power punchers in the history of the 170 pound division in terms of general knockdown. So if he's going to join, that stratosphere, then great. I guess I'm wrong. But there's not a strong evidentiary basis for it. And in general, I think it's really interesting that if you go back and watch Ramiz as well, he's never won range striking exchanges over anybody in his entire career. And that's going back to regional level MMA. He's never done that to anybody. So yes, are there some disconcerting things about Court in terms of his general minute winning ability? Has he gotten beat by some, maybe not the greatest of strikers in the world? Sure, I hear that. But my take is more so like, I just don't know how Pick'em is justified here at all, because Ramiz is either going to have to answer one or two different things or do something to Court McGee that has never been done before, or it's been done very minimally. So I think it's a great vet lesson spot here, coupled with the fact that Court, I think, showed up in the best shape of his career in his last outing against Claudio Silva, Abu Dhabi black belt. Went out there and got 8+ minutes of control time on the dude and beat the shit out of him on the ground and was never even close to being submitted by a pretty high-level grappler. Say what you want about Claudio Silva, but still pretty impressive to me. So I still haven't really seen any reasons or any takes as to why this fight should be pick him outside of the fact you said the Court's 37, he might be done. There's not really much strong evidence to suggest that that's the case. I'm not saying Court's a lock, that you got to fucking load him or anything this week, or he's minus 300. I'm not saying that, but I think he should at a bare minimum be minus 150 here.
I mean, do you even think that Ramiz is a better all-around grappler than Court?
No. He's not. He's a fucking he's a kitchen sink purple belt.
So that's where I am here, because I'm like, the only argument really for Ramiz in my mind is Court is 37. But like, I'll be honest, I think it's so out there having this even that I'm almost concerned by how out there it is, if that makes sense. I'm like, how is this really even possible? I don't think there's virtually any chance that Ramiz, not virtually any, I shouldn't say that. I think the chances of him subbing Court are remarkably low. Like, Court's gone out there and been competitive in the grappling with Ryan LaFleur, superior grappler. He out-grappled Alex Garcia, superior grappler. Like you said, out-grappled Claudio Silva. Silva tried to take his back and wasn't able to control him. Brady wasn't able to control him. I don't think there's any chance here of him getting grapple fucked, to be honest, for 15 minutes. And at distance, it's like, I get it. McGee's been dropped a few times. He got dropped 2 fights ago, but like Carlos Condit, even like I would favor Carlos Condit against Ramiz fairly significantly, even with Condit's takedown defense, to be honest. Condit's one of the most dangerous strikers in the history of the division. Like, can I really put that much stock in Condit dropping him? Like, not really. Court's got 3x the amount of fights as him. He has elite cardio against a guy with bad cardio. He's not going to get out grappled. He's the busier striker. One of the things that scared me when I was doing tape was how slow Court is. But then I taped for Miz, and I'm like, man, he is slow as well. Like, his hands are not fast at all. And on top of which, he doesn't throw combinations. He doesn't really mix in kicks very much. He's just basically a meat and potatoes boxer who doesn't throw strikes, who also has bad cardio. Look, I get it. Court McGee's 2-5 in his last 7 fights. Maybe that's where the line is. But I literally, including Diego Lima, favor every single guy that Court McGee has lost to in this run fairly significantly against Ramiz Brahimaj. I have nothing against Ramiz personally, but unless he gets matchups like Sasha Palatnikov, a guy who just is out of his depth on the mat, I just don't think he's winning many UFC fights. I don't think he's a UFC level talent. He's not a UFC level striker. He doesn't have UFC level cardio. I'm not even convinced he's an elite grappler, to be honest. If McGee was 30 and not 37, I'd probably be max betting this, to be honest. But he is 37. He is 37, and it is worth, considering that he could be done. Even though I'm with you, Luke, there's not, I think if the guy who showed up and fought Claudio Silva last fight shows up here, he's going to beat the fucking shit out of Ramiz. But
dude had a six-pack too. I don't mean to cut you off, but the dude showed up, in my opinion, if you've watched Court throughout the course of his career, kind of, just a general, I wouldn't say flabby, but just kind of normal body type. Yeah. Dude showed up jacked. Dude had a 6-pack in his last fight. I think the dude looked in the best shape of his career.
He did, and if you check out his Instagram recently, he looks in great shape. He's big. He looks ripped. Yeah, I think he should be Look, again, I would say I had him like minus 185, like 65% here, just because, 37, he could fall off a cliff. But if all things were equal, I literally think if it was peak court, I'd honestly have him at like minus 400, to be completely honest. I just don't think Ramiz offers a whole lot that should trouble him here. So I like McGee quite a bit. Lags, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add, to be honest with you. I think you guys covered mostly everything. I think Ramiz is pretty limited to a round one finish, I would say. And how highly are you really going to price that to give this, this lines it even? So I think it's obviously a great spot for court. I got a unit at court minus 115, and then I also have a half unit on court to win in round 3 or decision at plus 170.
Yeah, fair. I don't mind that either. I mean, he could finish him late for sure. Moving on, we have another semi-passionate take that I have here. We got Jamie Pickett taking on ugly man Joseph Holmes. I bet Pickett here. I don't. I guess for me, I just don't really see Holmes as a UFC caliber fighter at this point, and it's mostly because look, I think he's got a good frame for the division. He's an okay athlete, but on the feet, he's pretty much just kind of a jab and kick guy. Whereas Pickett, I actually think, despite woeful volume issues, is a fairly talented boxer, is a decent kickboxer. On top of which, because of how much he's never faced anybody as big as him, Holmes, and the size parity here combined with the fact they're going to be open stance, it's really not easy to jab a guy in open stance. Even at the top of the division, it's not that easy to do. And at this level, against a guy who is a fairly experienced striker, I don't think he's going to have much success with it. And so then it's like, can he out grapple Pickett? Maybe. I mean, Pickett's had issues there in the past, but like 2 fights ago, I watched Joseph Holmes lose minutes and get out grapple proportions against Dwayne Diggs, who's 3-2 in LFA. I just don't. I think his submissions and his career of submissions is less him being a good grappler than he's opportunistic, and he was fighting a bunch of guys who had basically 0 professional wins and had no idea what they're doing. I think Pickett's the better wrestler. I think the athleticism difference here is going to be pronounced. Like Pickett's the first real athlete he's fought, and I just think Pickett's a superior striker. Look, the bottom line is Pickett has 3 times the amount of fights that he does. He's fought real competition. He's beaten real competition. He's a decent striker. Holmes has been fighting bums. Even his contender series fight was against 34-year-old Shante Barnes, whose like opponents combined win-loss was like 17-49, and he lost around there and was getting outstruck. Unless he can dominate Pickett in the grappling, and I really don't think he can, I don't see how he deserves to be a favorite here. Look, I'm not saying I'd make Pickett a big favorite because Pickett does have output issues, and I do think has a penchant for mentally collapsing in fights. But I just think he's the far more skilled fighter and he's the far more proven fighter. So I'm on Pickett here. I think this is a pretty good spot for him. I think he should be at least minus 150. Legs, what do you think?
I think the last 2 things you touched on is really the reason why I'm staying off Pickett here. The mental midget, kind of issues he has in his fights, and obviously the volume issues we have. To me, coming out of tape, I was like, oh, this is the perfect, like the Spider-Man meme where they're just pointing at each other like the same thing. I'm like, yep, this is that. Like I feel like this is a perfect like flip a coin type of matchup. Like I don't really have too strong opinions here. I think Pickett's probably the better striker because he works in combination better. But yeah, overall, I don't really have too strong opinions here.
Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, so this is one of the type of like archetypes of fights that I'm really trying to stay away from this year, to be honest. I think it's probably the highest variance spot on the card. I think there's actually a lot of parallels between both in terms of their volume, both being very, inconsistent. I do think Pickett's the better wrestler, and I think that's probably the main path for him in the fight. Or I shouldn't say the main path for him in the fight because I think he could go forward, but at the same time, I can't also unsee the fact of him getting, 3x'd on strikes by Tafon. Like, I think both guys generally deal with effective pressure pretty poorly. And I also can't unsee the fight for Pickett going back against Charles Byrd, where he was taken down, passed, and submitted within probably a 15-second sequence. The best way I classified it is I think it's a higher level regional fight that's happening in the UFC. Yeah. Is really how I classified it. I think Holmes could have some upside, to be honest. I think he's a decent athlete, but there's just so many different things in his game that I think he needs to tweak. One being the output. One, I think he has some poor defensive tendencies. 2, he will play from guard. I think he needs to work on his offensive wrestling, but there's just so many of the same things I think you can say for Pickett as well, like him getting absolutely iced by Jordan Wright. is still something that's going to stick out in my mind like a sore thumb, because
don't hate on the Ninja.
What's that?
Don't hate on the Ninja. Don't hate
you
on
guys.
him.
You guys know, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, I am not a fan of the Beverly Hills Ninja. I think he sucks. So to go out there and get rolled by that guy, we'll see. It's just one of those fights where when you see kind of the line closer to pick 'em, there's just so much. I can see either guy looking like a hindsight favorite, or like a large hindsight favorite, or pick 'em, being largely justified. I know we're seeing more steam towards Holmes, which is why I understand bets on Pickett. I guess I'd be more inclined to back that, just because he's a bit more battle tested. But I do think Holmes could have some potential upside. He's only 26 years old. He is working out with Kraus now pretty consistently. If there's a guy out there to kind of tweak his game and make some adjustments for, to improve his overall trajectory, we'll see. So actually my pick is going to be Holmes, but I would probably actually be more inclined to bet Pickett.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. I'm upset with you that you're picking Holmes here, but that's fine.
I'm upset with you that you're trashing Beverly Hills Ninja. Come on, man.
I know.
I might just get kicked off the podcast after this break.
One of these days, we're going to make money on the Beverly Hills Ninja League. Whether that's fading him or betting on it.
I almost did in round 1 against Bruno Silva.
Did you have round Hill? Oh, you did. That's right. He did hurt him in that fight.
And the under 1.5.
Moving on, Lags. I'll go with you here. We got Joe Anderson Brito taking on Bill Algeo. What are your thoughts? And this fight, by the way, folks, might get canceled. TBD.
Yeah, which actually it seems like there's probably a good chance that it does.
I'm going to say 75% it does.
Yeah. But not a super passionate take, I would say. But, I'm on the Brito side here. I have one unit on him at minus 125. I think pretty much he checks every box here outside of like the cardio. Obviously, there's a slight cardio concern of him, but I think he's more of like that effective gasser type. He's going to keep throwing. He's going to keep going in that third round. And, I think he's got the higher finishing upside here. I think he's got the bigger moment upside if this goes 15 minutes. And I think he's got a huge grappling upside here. So minus 125, I think he's worth a small poke.
Luke, what are your thoughts?
I think this is going to be a fun breakdown, because I think we have Lags on one side. I think we have John on one side, and I think you have me in the middle, who does not have a cent on the fight. So you're going to get everything all over the board here. I am picking Brito here just because I think he does have a game that has given Algeo troubles. But my question is he as good of a wrestler as some of the guys that have been able to take Algeo down and have that type of consistency? And even in doing so, I mean, I think Algeo is like a decent scrambler. But the problem I have with him on the ground, even though he is a black belt, he's one of those guys who will consistently give his back. And despite him being extremely defensively responsible there, he does a great job of fighting hands and clearing hooks. It's just optically not good when you're getting your back taken like that, even if you're fine in those positions, because obviously the judges are going to give credence to the person who's offensively pursuing that. So I do think Brito has, wrestling advantage. I think he potentially has some of those similar archetypes that have given Algeo some issues from an optical perspective. And I think the wrestling is ultimately the difference in this fight. I do still have some questions on Brito's gas tank. I don't think he's a very technical striker, to be honest. He's kind of just large, winging big bombs. Despite Algeo being crazy hittable, the dude's tough. He's fought a lot of really good guys, and he's tough to get out of there. And he's going to also throw a shitload of volume despite the amount that he eats. So I do think there's some potential gassiness from Brito that could come into play here if he's not able to get Algeo out. So I do think there's a lot of variance on the fight, coupled with the fact that Algeo is the biggest step up in competition that Brito has fought. But what I will say, is someone who laid 3 units on Diego Lopez against Brito on the Contender Series, I mean, my opinion on him has changed a decent amount from that fight. I did not think he would be able to sit there and grind out a guy like Diego Lopez, who's a pretty talented grappler. And he was able to do that. And I think that's one of his main core competencies. I think the guy's very physical and very physically strong at the weight class to boot. So I lean Brito. I'm not really trying to lay the chalk on it. Once again, I'm also just weary to lay the general chalk on these Contender Series debutants, because I just don't think it's an overall long-term profitable strategy. I'd rather just take in more data, coupled with, once again, him taking a step up in competition against Algeo. So I lean Brito. I think the optics and the wrestling are what's going to be the difference here, and what wins Brito this fight, but it's not a confident take in any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't bet Bill. I probably will if he goes to plus 125. It's kind of a weird fight because I think offensively, Bill has some tools that could really make life difficult for Brito, in particular in scrambles and in just output. Like, I trust Bill to throw a lot more strikes. He's a bit bigger, he's longer. The concern for me, it's not even, it's funny. I think most people are betting Brito because of the grappling. I feel, and like you touched on it, Luke, yeah, the optics of the back take aren't great, but I feel pretty confident that Bill's not going to get held down here. Lamas had a hard time controlling him. Ramos couldn't control him really at all. And I actually think Ramos has a better jiu-jitsu game than Brito does. And so while I expect Bill to get taken down, I don't think he's very likely to get controlled for extended periods of time. Like, I expect he'll be able to separate. The real concern for me, and to be clear, one of the reasons I kind of lean him is like I don't really think if Brito gets 4 takedowns in the first 6 minutes, I'm not sure he's going to keep going for them because I don't know that he has the gas to attempt 10 to 15. The bigger concern for me is, just like his takedown defense, Bill's striking is defensively void as well. And so it's like while I trust the output a bit more, I do think Brito hits harder. I think the optics of his striking look better. And so I think it could easily be one of those fights where it plays out of range for 12 minutes, and Bill lands a lot more strikes, but the hard shots and the head strikes are all coming Brito's way, and he just wins a fairly clear decision. Now on the other side of things, I do think Bill has superior cardio. I think he can handle himself in the grappling like fine, and maybe have some success in scrambles. And I do think he's going to land more strikes. And so ultimately, I think it's a pretty close fight. I have it about evens because I do think the optics favor Brito, but Bill's fought much better competition. He's a much more battle-tested guy. He's fought very good grapplers. He's fought better grapplers than Brito, like quite often throughout his career, and he's got the better output and the better cardio. But I think I need plus 125 to play it here, so I'm holding. I actually don't think the over is a bad look here. I really don't think there's almost any chance that Bill gets finished, to be completely honest. Well, gets finished.
What's
by
the line
submission.
on that, John?
Minus 150, minus 155.
Yeah.
For 2.5. I really don't think Bill's getting finished here. He's been, he went 15 with Loughnane, and Loughnane's a pretty big hitter, and he ate a lot of shots in that fight, never really got close to getting finished. I actually think the finishing equity is likely more on Bill's side, just if Brito gasses out. But I think the over is a decent look here. I might play it. If it gets to plus 125, I'll take the poke on Bill. I understand the Brito side of things. I think it's a close fight. I think it's probably going to be one of the better fights on the card, in my opinion. But moving on, we got Dakota Bush and we got Vyacheslav Borschev. Debut for Borschev, second fight in the UFC for Bush. Luke, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's kind of a binary type of fight. It's your classic striker versus grappler, in my opinion. Whoever's able to get off on their type of game, I think is going to look probably pretty solid. We know that both guys have obviously never been finished before, but I kind of just generally like fight violence here. Despite Bush never being finished before, he just has not fought the caliber of striker that Borschev is, in my opinion, and I just kind of think he's also a liability at space, to be completely candid. So when this fight's upright, I think he's very live to get knocked out. Conversely, when we have seen Slava drop minutes, drop rounds, even drop fights, historically, it has come from a wrestling and grappling-based component, and I do think Bush is the best wrestler-grappler archetype that has fought Borschev to date, who's also a guy who's going to, I should say, not be your traditional lay and pray type of guy. He's very aggressive. He's going to hunt backs. He's going to hunt necks. So I just think the general dynamic of the fight is going to force finishes between both guys. I think Bush is the side from a money line perspective, despite me thinking actually Borschev knocks him out. I can't lay like any sort of chalk on the guy against a dude who's going to relentlessly pursue takedowns against him, who's pretty solid too. But to cover more bases, it's actually my biggest bet of the card. I laid the under 2.5 at minus 120. I think it's taken a decent amount of steam since then. I think it's up around minus 150 now. But yeah, like I said, whoever's able to get off on their game, I like to finish.
Yeah, so I'm with you there. It's funny. I was listening to Sean Orr and Tajik Bey Spaces a bit earlier, and Sean had said, I thought I'd really love Bush going into tape, and then I felt angry at myself for thinking that. And that's kind of how I felt. I think I told you guys last month, I was like Dakota Bush plus 170. Like, I honestly might max bet that. And the thinking was, I've seen Slava get his back taken multiple times. I know Bush is a back taker. I know he's going to go for it. But man, like, you go back, and it's like, as tempting as I am to go with the contenders fade, it's like, is Dakota Bush really better than a contenders fighter? Like, he's fought 3 guys in his career who I would classify as high regional to lower tier UFC, between Hubbard, Bryce Logan, and Jaleel Willis, and he got beaten pretty soundly in all 3 of those fights. The guys that he has really abused are really low tier guys. Look, Slava, I think he's got some issues as a grappler. I like the fact that he doesn't accept position. He tries to get up, but he does give his back to get up. And he's had his back taken multiple times. And so, I think you nailed it, Luke. Like, how can you lay a big number on him here? There's, like, if Bush comes out here, takes him down, and submits him in 2 minutes, I won't be surprised, to be completely honest. Like, I won't be. But on the other hand, Bush, I don't think will consolidate. He's not the kind of guy who's going to take you down, consolidate half guard, and hold you down. He's going to look to pass, just grab the back and submit you. And I don't think he's the best grappler ever. He's got a decent back take. I don't think he's a great wrestler. I think he's kind of weak. And so if he can't have that, plus his cardio is somewhat suspect, to be honest. And so it's like, if he can't have that success, I think Slava's going to fucking butcher him on the feet, to be completely honest. You guys know how I am with contenders, guys, how hesitant I am to say anything about them positive. But I think Slava's striking is like at a top 25 level, just as kickboxing. I think the grappling has a lot to be worked on, but he is a very good striker. He's a better striker than anybody, including Austin Hubbard, that I think Bush has fought. And the guy does a ton of attritional work, and we've seen Bush slow before. So I kind of think I like the under as well here. It's pretty binary, right? If Bush – I can't imagine a scenario where Bush hits 4 takedowns and grinds him out for 11 minutes. I kind of think if he's getting that kind of control time, it's going to be on his back and he's going to submit him. And if not, I really don't think Bush is going to survive in there. He was in some bad spots against Hubbard, but Hubbard's not a finisher. He wasn't regionally. He's not a big hitter. He's not very high output. Slava is all those things, and he does attritional work. Like, I think the under should be about minus 200. I played it at minus 125, but I actually think there's still some value there at the minus 150, to be completely honest.
And real quick, John, I think it is important to note that, like, Borschev was like a K1 champion at like 18, and the dude's had like 300 plus kickboxing fights. Yeah. Like, the dude's stand-ups is pretty fucking legit. Just wanted to throw that out there.
No, for sure. Lags, what do you think?
Yeah, echo both of your guys' sentiments here on the under as well. It's like same kind of thing like what you said, John. Bush is just kind of weak in his grappling transitions. He just doesn't seem like a very strong wrestler. I don't think he's a great wrestler. And I think more often than not, Slava is just probably going to brutalize him. And the attritional work to the body, to the head, I think he's going to end up KOing him. But yeah, I don't mind the under minus where it's at minus 145 now, but no play for me.
Yeah, agreed. Moving on, Legs, I'm going to start with you here. This was originally listed as the co-main. Thank God it got moved off, because this is the beer break fight. But we got Kelleher Chookagian taking on Jennifer Maia. What are your thoughts here?
Not a ton of thoughts here. I do have a small play on Chookagian by decision at plus 105 for 1 unit. But I really don't think how – I know it's a square take, I guess, maybe, that the fight's not going to change much from the first fight. But I really don't see much evidence as to why it shouldn't. I think Chook's going to be able to stick and move from the outside. Her game is just so efficient. She's just so good at it and good at weaseling those decisions. And she's just an efficient striker. So, I like her a lot. I think her by decision at plus money, or even where it's at now, minus 120, I think it's a solid bet.
Luke, how about you? Chikadze, Jennifer Maia.
Yeah, I think Chook's a decent spot on this card. And it's like something I've tried to address and kind of change about my game in terms of how I look at things. Like, there's certain fighters where you see them, at like a moderate chalk number, and you're like, okay, well, they've had a bunch of close fights in the past, but it's like there's certain fighters out there who just win close fights pretty consistently, and that's what Chookagian does. Another very similar example of that is like a Brad Tavares or whatever. You say, why in God's name would you lay a ton of chalk on Brad Tavares? Well, Brad Tavares wins a lot of close fights because he's a very good boxer. So it's like, it's one of those scenarios where, like, I understand why, maybe somebody wouldn't be interested in laying it or whatever, because she, just fights in that type of style. But to Lags' point, we did just see this fight 2 years ago. Both girls are in their early 30s. It's not like you can say that there's been some massive regression or evolution in either of their games. And I think we largely, once again, see kind of a similar fight where, in that first fight, it was pretty clear, who was the better striker in that matchup. Obviously, Chookagian plays that range game really well where, Maia comes out of, that shoebox camp in Brazil where she kind of needs some girls to just stand in front of her where she can kind of get off on those type of combinations, but that's just not, the game that Chookagian's going to give to her, and she never has in her entire career. And we saw that play out in the first fight as Maia was just kind of one step behind that entire fight. The one credit I will give to Maia is if she does put on her singlet in this fight and comes out and wrestles a lot. I think that's really her path and how she can potentially be, I wouldn't say necessarily value, but make this a lot more greasier. But even in that, in terms of the first fight, there were clinch and wrestling based exchanges early on. Chook did a very good job of stuffing those. She did get her down at the end of the third, I believe, and got like a minute of control, but then Chook was able to threaten a leg lock and stand up. But traditionally, I think Jennifer Maia lands under 0.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. Yeah. She's just not a girl who's going to go out there and proactively wrestle and grapple. So there's just not a ton of evidence that she's going to do that. Once again, I think it would be smart for her to do that because I think that's going to help her and maximize her path to win in the fight. But in general, I think Chook's just a really bad style matchup for Maia. So I like Chook in the fight.
Yeah, I don't have a bet here, but I more or less agree. I think Chookagian gets a little too much shit because, of the screaming and everybody says she punches in air. But she's a pretty skilled kickboxer. She's one of the few fighters in WMMA who can fight on the back foot and do it effectively. She's beaten some really, basically she doesn't lose to anybody except, Valentina, really. I don't think a whole lot. I don't think a whole lot's changed from the first fight. The only reason I don't really have interest in the number, like Luke, you just touched on it, it's like, I can see a path where Maia holds her down. Like, I don't really think Chook has the best get-up game in the world. And if Maia gets on top of her and her controlling her for 2 rounds, I think that's a live outcome. The problem is, it's like, look, and I bet Jessica I against Jennifer Maia, and she should have won that fight, to be honest. But, like, that was her best path against Jessica I. And instead, basically she won the fight because Jessica I got hit with a headbutt and her head busted open, I guess that's literally why she won that fight. And she didn't go for it there. She never goes for a wrestling. The only time she really has was against Valentina, which was smart, but we haven't seen her do it since, really. I don't expect she will here. I would have played Chook at minus 150. Unfortunately, I didn't tape it in time, and it got out to, where it is now, at minus 180, minus 185, which I think is, I think minus 200 area. I think that's more or less right. I don't think decision line's a bad line either. I'm just always nervous, it's stupid, but that one of these days Chook's just gonna head kick somebody. She does throw a lot of high kicks, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think much has changed. I think Chook's a superior striker. Maybe Maia wrestles her, but Jennifer Maia's only attempted like 4 takedowns in the UFC, so not really something that's fairly reliable to happen here. But it's a pass for me. We move on to something that, I'll start with you here, Luke. We got Brandon Royval taking out Rogerio Bontorin. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the better fights on the card. I think Bontorin's probably the side, but it's so tough because to me, the fight's entrenched on how his gas holds, and I don't know how it's going to hold because traditionally Royval is a guy who's going to throw a ridiculous amount of strikes despite his, takedown defense not being great. He has obviously had struggles on bottom in the past, but he's one of those guys who is just not going to stop doing things. And he's going to continue to make guys work. And the thing with Bontorin, despite me thinking he's actually a pretty good wrestler, grappler, archetype, like he took the back of Magomed Bibulatov twice, which is something that's not particularly easy to do. We just have not seen Bontorin go out there and wrestle fuck someone over the course of 15 minutes. He just has never done that before. So when you throw that against a guy in Royval, despite me thinking that it's a path, I don't know if he's going to be able to just hold a guy down or actually even necessarily maybe win on top. Like he could lose even on top if Royval's just constantly elbowing him, constantly throwing up submissions, that type of deal. So that's really my concern. And then on the feet, obviously Royval's hittable. I think Bontorin's live for a KO, but at the same time, the problem I also have with Bontorin is that his output is generally pretty inconsistent. You know, he looked good against Schnell in a generally higher output affair, but largely that has not been like the MO for Bontorin. So I think that was, I want to say, an anomaly, but definitely something that's kind of outside of the norm for him. So I just kind of think on the feet, Royval can probably break him with pressure if he doesn't get knocked out. Conversely, we've seen Bontorin hurt on multiple occasions too in the France fight, and we even saw him hurt back on the Contender Series as well. So I kind of think both are live for knockouts, but in general, in terms of the minute winning ability, Royval's just pace is a lot more consistent. So I more so kind of like lean Royval in the fight for cardio and activity based purposes, but I do think there is a path for Bontorin to win this fight. But it's a pretty easy pass for me unless the line goes crazy.
Yeah, I mean, so you guys know I'm never the guy that's like, I want to see weigh-ins. I firmly think that that's a tinfoil shit. You know, people are like, I need to see weigh-ins. This is the rare fight, though, where I feel like I need to, like, is Bontorin going to miss weight by 5 pounds? He missed weight at 135 in his last fight, you know? Because I do think, you know, when I look at them skill-wise, Brandon Royval, I'm not going to go on another huge Brandon Royval rant here, but
you could do
I do not think he's a very talented fighter, to be honest. What I do think he is that he has great cardio and he understands his best path to victory is to go crazy and steer into chaos and basically keep nonstop output coming at you the whole time. But he isn't a particularly big hitter. He has virtually no standing defense and he has virtually no takedown defense, you know. And on the mat, you know, he tries to attempt submissions and he's gotten away with it a bit, but also he hasn't really fought anybody. Like even Tim Elliott, who was taking him down at will. You know, Elliott is an idiot. He should have just consolidated half guard in that fight and held him there instead of attempt to try to go for front chokes over and over and steering into scrambles. He hasn't fought. The last time he fought somebody that actually focused on position over submission was Casey Kenny, who absolutely ragdolled him for 5 rounds. And Casey Kenny is not a guy with particularly good cardio, and he was basically able to make it look like, you know, version 2.0 of Derek Minner and Charles Rosa, you know? And that's kind of like, you know, what I look at when I see this. Like on the feet, I do think Bontorin is the better striker, to be honest. Like Matt Schnell is a good striker. Outstriking Matt Schnell at distance is a fairly impressive achievement. But I do agree, you know, if they're on the feet and Royval can survive early, you know, he brings the kind of attritional work that could cause Bontorin issues and break him down the stretch. I just kind of think Bontorin can take him down whenever he wants. Like even like, would it shock you if Bontorin slowed down and took him down and just managed to lay in his guard? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think it would. And, like, looking at Royval's career, he only has 1 submission that was not from bottom in his entire career, which is crazy to think about, but it's nuts. And the guy's 1-4 in decisions, and yet he's a favorite here, which, like, I don't think he's the more skilled fighter anywhere this fight goes. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. He's not very strong, and Bontorin is very strong. The big question is really Bontorin's cardio, but honestly, it's like the more I think about it, I'm just like, man, how often do you get the superior fighter taking on a guy that he's probably a tier or 2 above as a plus 140 dog? I understand the cardio angle, but the reality is Royval, even his wins, it was a guillotine against Kai Kara-France and that bizarre Elliott gas out. I don't know. I think Bontorin's the side. I'm just debating. I want to see the way in there and see what happens, but I think Bontorin's decided the money line, and Bontorin decision only is minus 115, which seems like a fucking impossibly bad line. Like Brandon Royval is 1-4 in his career in decisions. I don't see any way. I shouldn't say any way, but I would honestly have like a decision like minus 400 Bontorin here. It makes no sense to me at all. So I like Bontorin here. Lags, what do you think?
So real quick side note, line just got released from Best Fight Odds. Kelleher is minus 325.
Okay. That's about
right. So take here, I have unit and a half on the under 2.5 rounds, minus 160. I think, you know, Luke summed it up really with the cardio is the big factor here, I think. And honestly, just to me, Bontorin has never really shown great cardio in the past. And a guy that struggles to make weight at 125, I just don't think it's really going to hold up here against a guy who's going to push one of the like most hellacious paces that I think he's going to. It's just more or less, if he has the cardio, can he hold Royval down? And I think the scramble ability of Royval is going to be enough that I think he probably can get a late finish if he doesn't get finished early here in this fight. So I like the under 2.5 here. I think Royval 2-3 is probably good spots as well.
All right, head to head. We move on to the people's main event. We all know it. We got Chase Sherman taking on Jake Collier. Lags, I'll stay with you.
Jake Collier, our boy. He was robbed in the last fight. Can't
Lost
start
a
off
lot
with
of
that.
money on that.
Yep, that was not fun.
A lot of money on that.
Had a unit and a half at plus 210 on the money line.
I had 3.
Yep. So, but to start off this one, I think where the line's creeping at, where it's at now, Jake Collier minus 140, I think that's about right because I think pretty much Jake hasn't covered outside of power and finishing ability. I think other than a first round knockout here for Chase Sherman, that Collier probably is able to just outstrike him over the course of 15 minutes. But like, I guess the difference between this fight and the Philippe fight is Philippe is like one of those guys that like is more of an effective slower down. Like he will still throw volume late in the fight, whereas Chase Sherman's not going to throw volume late in this fight. He's not trying to be in the fight at all. So yeah, I like Collier here, but no play for me.
Luke, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like Collier as well, probably for like 4 main reasons. I think he has speed advantages. I think he has movement advantages. I think he has cardio advantages. And I do think he actually has defensive advantages, despite both not being, defensive striking savants. He is a better defensive striker than Sherman, where he's at least shown, concepts of like keeping a higher guard, circling off, where Chase Sherman's just a flat-footed, stick in the mud, slip your punches, block punches with his face type of guy. So obviously both guys pretty high output heavyweights. Sherman's got a decent clinch game, some of those calf kicks, but I don't think it's as concerning for me because I've actually seen, Collier show some concepts of actually checking leg kicks, and he's not a guy who's necessarily just going to stand there and brawl box you, which is traditionally what Chase Sherman, largely needs to succeed. I think we're going to see a lot of outside lateral movement from Collier. I think he's got more diversity of attack in terms of targeting all 3 levels in what he's throwing his touchdown. I think he's got speed advantages. And I think kind of a misnomer that people are losing here is when, he got quote unquote beat by Felipe. And people say, oh, well, look, people look at the Sherman fight or whatever, he slowed down against Porter, but they were like, oh, Luke, well, look, he slowed down against Felipe. Well, that happened because of the attritional body work that Felipe was able to do in the fight. And if you're familiar with Sherman historically, he's not a guy who's just like digging the body, relentlessly. If he's able to get in the clinch, sure. But like at space, he's not a guy who's just relentlessly digging the body. So I don't think there's much evidence to suggest that Collier's like a gasser. I mean, the dude went out there and landed over 100 significant strikes on Volante, kept a pretty significant pace over the course of that fight. So it's once again, it's a sloppier, lower level heavyweight fight. So it's not something I have any supreme degree of confidence in, just for the general variance that comes with that. But I just think Collier's the better striker. I think he's the better minute winner, coupled with the fact that Chase Sherman is 1-4 in the UFC when his fights have hit the cards, 1-5. If you actually factor in his fight with Sakai, where he got finished in the 3rd round, a fight he was on his way to losing a decision. So that just suggests to me, over a pretty large sample size, that the guy, despite his high output nature, is just not a great minute winner. I think Collier is going to be the better one here. Like I said, I think he has speed advantage. I think he has movement advantages. I think he has cardio advantages. And I think he has defensive advantages as to why he should not be minus 125. I think he should be probably closer to that 60-65% indication.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think I more or less agree with you. Defensively in particular, like, I'm not saying Collier's a defensive savant, kind of like you said, but like the guy moves his head when he throws strikes in the pocket. He keeps his guard very high when he's exchanging. Like, Felipe is a fairly accurate boxer, and he was having a lot of issues, even in pocket exchanges. Collier was mostly outboxing him in the pocket in that fight. And then you look at Chase Sherman, and it's like Parker Porter, who's 3 inches shorter with 3 inches shorter reach than Collier, was landing a jab in Sherman's face pretty much whenever he wanted in that fight, even completely gassed out. It's weird. There's just like virtually no way I can project Parker Porter to outperform Collier against Sherman, if that makes sense. I think Collier as a striker is just a better striker everywhere. He's a better kicker. He's a better boxer. He's more defensively responsible than Porter is. I guess the big concern for me with Collier is I do think he might be a tad bit fragile. Like, he's got KO'd a few times at middleweight, and he's obviously got, I mean, Tom Aspinall, I can forgive that. But I didn't like the way he responded to some of the shots he ate from Volante. And so I do think Sherman's going to have some opportunities early here. But, yeah, like, I'm torn. Like, I've been thinking about playing the Collier money line, but I also am kind of the mind that, like, if this goes past a round, Sherman's, I don't want to say fucked, but he's going to be in deep trouble. Like, I'd almost rather have Collier minus 200, even if he's up around after a round live, than play him minus 140, if that makes sense. Because, like, I do think, like, I mean, Sherman in the Porter fight, that collapse mentally was almost unbelievable to watch. You know, he was touching Porter whenever he let his hands go. He just didn't want anything left. Like, when Porter wouldn't go down when he got touched, he would just kind of quit. And Collier, like I said, he's a much better defensive striker than Porter is. He's a much more accurate striker. And Collier gasses, and I'd say my biggest fear with him is just like, I honestly think he lost to Felipe because of optics. Like, I thought he clearly on rewatch won the first 2 rounds of that fight, but the gassed out optics and backing up against the fence were pretty ugly, and that could happen here. But yeah, you know, you got me Spread's KO plus 150. I don't think that's bad because I think Collier does throw enough that like he could get him out of there late. But yeah, I mean, I lean Collier. I think I'd rather take a shot at it live though, especially if Sherman can win the first round, because I really think, you know, if this goes past 1, it's going to be downhill very quickly for Sherman. Maybe even some Collier 2-3 as well, to be honest.
So they do have props. They have props up now fully for FanDuel. So they have Collier round 3 decision at plus 125.
It's not terrible. It's not great though, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, it's.
You want a little medium.
That's like 10%. It's like
Yep. That's probably the actual, you know, difference, you know, between the money line and round 3 decision. But moving on, we have the main event. It's a good one. We got Calvin Kattar, we got Giga Chikadze, and I'm fading Giga again. What else is new? You know, how much more money can I lose fading Giga? I don't know. We're gonna find out. I'm not as big on Kattar as I was on Edson Barboza, who I was quite big on, or Jamal Emmers, who I was quite big on against Giga. I will give Giga some credit. You know, he obviously is better than what I gave him credit for being as a striker. But I still do think he's being lined right now as a top 5 fighter, which doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. Like, even if you want to go through, you know, Giga's resume and actually contextualize it, like his 2 best wins are the Barboza win and the Swanson win. But the Swanson fight was over in a minute. And even the Barboza fight, like, I felt great about my Barboza bet going into round 3. I thought Giga was pretty visibly starting to slow. And then he clipped him early in round 3. You know, it happens. And Barboza is, you know, he is hurtable. Again, I'm not trying to take anything away from him. He obviously beat Edson clean when they were fresh in that fight, which is impressive. But you go back past that, and it's like Brandon Davis. He gassed out late in that fight, was getting landed on hard. The Emmers fight, he got outlanded at distance pretty severely by Emmers, and again, it was just getting wailed on late in that fight. You go even past the Omar Morales fight. You know, he won that fight, but if you look at his output in round 3, it clearly falls off a cliff, and he is clearly breathing pretty deep. And so it's like now he's getting sucked into his second 5-round fight. The first one didn't go 5. Against Calvin Kattar, who, look, Kattar's got issues. I get it. He's coming off a bad beating. You know, he doesn't cut the cage off well. He's always been a guy that struggled with guys who could stick and move against him. And he struggled with leg kicks traditionally throughout his career. Giga can do all of that. But, you know, there's a couple important things here. First of all, how often has Kattar even been hurt in his career? The guy is probably one of the most durable guys in the UFC. You can say he's coming off a bad beating, but that fight was a year ago. And even then, you know, he never got dropped in that fight. And that's like, you have to make a pretty large assumption to say, oh, his durability is compromised without actually having any data to say his durability is actually compromised. And so in terms of the fight and what Kattar can do, first of all, my biggest concern probably is Kattar keeps a high guard, and like, I can very, very easily envision Giga just landing the Giga kick and folding him to the body like pretty quickly. I could definitely see it happening. But also, like, would it shock anybody if Kattar caught 1 or 2 of those kicks and took him down? Like, he's begging for that to happen one of these days. And I kind of think even if he can't dominate him on the mat, if he does that once or twice, it'll probably discourage him. I hope he does that. I don't know if he will. But even going past that, I think the closest comparison we have to this is the Zabit fight. And I actually think Zabit moves a lot better laterally than Giga does. And I actually, despite Zabit not having great cardio, he probably has better cardio than Kattar does, you know. And in that fight, yeah, Kattar was getting beaten early in the fight, but he wasn't getting dominated in that fight. He was coming on, you know, a bit in that fight. And then he obviously won round 3. Look, the bottom line is it's probably going to be a struggle early for Kattar. Giga's probably going to get off on kicks and the jab early in this fight. But if Kattar can find the pocket, I think he's a superior pocket boxer in just about every way. Giga keeps his hands pretty low, too. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm looking at it. I'm like, Gator was just plus 125 to Max Holloway, and now he's plus 200 to Giga Chikadze. Explain that to me. I have no idea. And when you actually look at the fight, sure, when they're fresh, Giga's the better striker. But this is a 5-round fight. He's fighting a durable guy across from him. It would be mildly surprising if he finished him early in this fight. Cater's not going to slow down. Cater is, unlike some of the other guys he's fought, like Emmers and whatnot, and Davis, Cater is a big hitter. He is a finisher. If Giga slows down in this fight, it's very different from having Brandon Davis and Jamal Emmers walking you down and Calvin Kattar firing shots at your head for the last 10 minutes of a fight. I just don't. I kind of think there's going to be a pretty clear pivot point. Look, there's a case to be made that live is the best way to play Kattar. The only thing I'd say, and I don't disagree, it's why I only put a unit down on it, and I'll probably look to add live. But look, Kattar's finished guys in the first round of fights before. He is a very, very dangerous striker if you give him time in the pocket. I know I'm all over the place this breakdown, but the last thing I'll say is, look, fighting on Giga has bad cardio to begin with. We know this. I don't really care. You can say, oh, he's won 3 decisions. He beat Edson in the 3rd round. Okay, cool. Have you guys looked at how he looked like at the end of those fights? None of those guys bring the kind of pace that Kattar is going to bring to him here. If he's going to play a back foot game that's even more exhausting for 25 minutes, I really don't think so. And if he's going to sit down and finally stop and trade in the pocket, I feel pretty good about my chances holding a Kattar ticket if they're boxing in the pocket, to be honest. Yeah, I like Kattar. I would slightly favor Giga because I do think he is the superior striker. That's fair. And I do think you have to favor him fairly substantially early in the fight. Maybe make him like minus 125, but plus 200 is fucking nuts, man. Like, I don't understand it at all.
Yeah.
Again, Kattar was plus 125 to Max fucking Holloway, who's one of the 2 best featherweights ever, and everybody was betting him. And now one fight later, everyone is betting Giga Chikadze against him. What the fuck is going on? We'll see. I may go down in smoke. I'm prepared. I'm prepared for it. Look, Giga's better than I gave him credit for, but we're gonna go out on this. I'm gonna go out on my shield here. Lags, what do you think?
I think what's crazy, just not about the line in general, that minus 250, it's like if you would have to project him to finish early in the first 2 rounds at such a high clip to justify that kind of line, and people are still laying it, knowing that he has bad cardio, and if this goes 5 rounds, like how are you going to be sitting there holding a minus 250 kind of ticket if this goes 5 rounds? There's no way, like volume wise.
How is he even minus 200 if this goes past 2 rounds? Right.
But,
that's where I am. I'm totally with you.
And I think you made a great point with like there's going to be a solid pivot point in this fight, and I think that's why I was looking at FanDuel earlier, and I think a solid play for this fight is the fight doesn't start round 5 at minus 152. I have a unit and a half on that. I think, like you said, there's going to be a solid pivot point. I think Giga's going to have success early. He can have success early in those first 2 rounds, but I think Calvin's going to be able to put it on him if this goes past that 10-minute mark. So I think anybody's live for finisher, but I think largely rounds 2 or 3 for either guy.
Yeah, I completely agree. Luke, what do you think?
So I'm actually on the over. I jumped in.
I thought you were about to say I'm on Giga. I was going to be like,
I should have probably just played off 5 units. Giga, fuck you, John. No, I played the over, and there's quite a few reasons for it. Obviously, you touched on, the durability factor of Kattar. Obviously, you touched on too, the guy is in some dude with pillows in his hands by any means. But I do think that obviously when this fight starts, we're seeing the more fresh component of Giga, where I think he largely will manage that distance better early on in the fight. If Giga is going to be the first guy out there to go out there and put Kattar out in 27 pro fights, I eat my bet. I'm 100% fine with that. So I was more looking to back the over, also because despite me largely agreeing with you guys that the later this fight goes, the more it favors Calvin. I mean, we still just haven't seen, Giga in those extended rounds. So I'm not going to just definitively say that he can't win those rounds at all. Like, I just don't know. And that's not to say necessarily that a later finish potentially couldn't happen from him. I don't think it's of the highest percentages, but nonetheless, it's still an unknown that I think has to be factored into some perspective. And I'm more so just looking to live bet Kattar, even though I think, pre-fight, I think his money line is definitely viable. I think it's definitely the side, but my angle is more so that, once again, even though the longer this fight goes, despite me favoring Kattar, I still think there's a scenario where Giga wins 1 maybe is looking pretty decent in the second round, and you're still seeing Kelvin plus 200 after 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes of this fight. And in theory, that also just chopped 5, 6, 7, 9 minutes of this fight of him potentially getting knocked out, where I can just go ahead and play him live. And I think that's actually just going to be a more conservative take. On the other side, maybe Kelvin actually does have more success early than I'm anticipating. Would I be willing to jump in on Kelvin at, favorite money early? I don't necessarily know. It depends on the line. But I guess my point is, like, even if the line isn't as great as I would have gotten on Kelvin pre-fight, I'm still taking out more inherent risk by just playing him live and not playing him pre-fight. So coupled with the fact that I'm already on the over, I'm not trying to double up on it, because if Giga kills him, now I'm out at 2 bets.
Right.
Whereas I think how I'm thinking about it, in a picture perfect scenario, which could definitely not go the right way, I think I might be able to double up on this fight and taking over, and then looking to hit Kattar live, still at a decent number and limit more risk.
Where did you cap the fight, Luke?
I think I put Giga 60%.
That's reasonable. Lags, what were you gonna say?
All right, so two last things there. Oh, I lost the one now. Oh man. Oh, I lost one. But another crazy line that I'm looking at now on DraftKings, though, they have Kelvin decision only at plus 180.
Oh, James just put that in the chat too.
That's a little nutty. I mean, I'm trying to fit, like, because it's really a question of how quick.
I remember my other thing real quick, and then we can go back to this. So I'm trying to stay off of more of those kind of spots what Luke was saying, where it's like you double up and you end up like fucking yourself, taking the over and then taking Kelvin like pre-fight, and then he just gets killed early, and then you're shit out of 2 bets, But back to this.
Fair.
But
I mean, I think it's because I feel like pretty confident that Kattar wins 4 and 5 at a very high clip, right? I mean, so then it's like you have to pull out one of the first 3. It's not that crazy. Yeah, I don't think that's bad. I might take a stab at it. But yeah, I mean, I kind of think Kattar's going to finish him, though, if he wins the fight, to be completely honest. I don't know. I'd be pretty surprised if it goes the distance. That's why
I'm bullish. That's why, sorry to cut you off again, but that's why I like the fight doesn't start round 5. And I think even at minus 150, it's a solid price, because these guys are going to be throwing leather, and I think one of these guys is probably going to go out.
Like, it's kind of weird. I think Kattar is like kind of, and I kind of feel like his finishing upside's being disrespected a little bit. Like, he's finished 4 of his last 5 opponents, and like outside of Chris Fishgold, I mean, Burgos, Lamas, Jeremy Stevens, it's not like he's finishing guys who are like going over with one shot, Like, he's a dangerous fucking striker. I feel like everyone talks like, oh, Kattar has no shot early in this fight. And it's like, okay, well, Lags, I mean, you sent that gif of Giga sprinting at Barbosa. Like, if he does that, we've seen how that works out. But yeah, I mean, I like Kattar here. Luke likes the over. I think, I don't know. I think it's crazy, but who knows? Maybe we're going to fade Giga all the way up to the Max Holloway fight.
We're gonna catch a nice. We're gonna catch a nice middle here. Luke's gonna cash the over 2.5. I'm gonna cash the doesn't start round 5. You're gonna cash Kelvin.
Yeah, that would be good. I have a feeling one of us is gonna probably lose money. Hopefully, it's not all 3 of us. That would be the Giga. Actually, Giga round 1. I guess Giga by decision.
Giga by decision would be the only way. Yeah.
we get completely fucked. So
and then we just stop the podcast. I think we might just get the fuck off YouTube after that.
But yeah, I mean, that'll do. We got next week. It's going to be a weird couple weeks, I think, guys. Like, we were talking about it before we went live, but like, we're probably going to get a bunch of cancellations, to be honest. But yeah, we'll be back next Wednesday. I mean, we got 270. It's not the best card ever. It's not the worst card either. But yeah, we'll be back next Wednesday, 10 p.m. Eastern. Good luck on your bets, everybody, this weekend. As usual, we got Lags at Danny_Lags, Luke at SWR_betting, and me, John, at MMA Fox. Good luck and enjoy the fights, guys. Take it easy.